Okay, welcome back to the channel. This is a bit of a different style episode today with an interview with a leader in the solar industry. A few weeks ago, I was catching up with a friend of mine called Thom, who's just started in the last few months a new job at an organization called Open Solar. He mentioned that the founder or co-founder of Open Solar had been talking about the growth and the potential of solar power in transforming the energy system and offered to introduce me for a chat. Jump forward to today and we had 25 minutes hearing a bit about the solar industry, where it might be going and what it means for the global energy system, and then specifically for the UK with all things electrification. So over to me and Birchy earlier today for some ramble chat around the energy transition. I hope you enjoy it. Okay, well, thanks, Birchy, for joining me today on this low carbon lifestyle episode. A bit of a different style conversation that I'm not really used to doing, but we'll see how we get on. But yeah, thank you so much for joining. And I mean, it'd be great to hear a little bit about your story, how you became a kind of leader in the solar industry and where you've come from and what's the process been of getting to where you are now with Open Solar.
Sure. Yeah. So I've been doing solar like 25 years in various forms. I've always been passionate about the environment and had basically what I kind of describe as my midlife crisis in my mid-20s. I was trying to do socially responsible investment, kind of early green ethical investing stuff in London, and decided that I just fell in love with solar and I'm going to change my life and just focus 100% on solar because I was so excited about really early on the direction of falling costs and rapid growth and what that could do for the world. So I packed everything in a bag, went to Australia, did a postgrad in photovoltaics at the University of New South Wales, did a spell at BP Solar, did my first startup in the Bay Area in California, so the Silicon Valley software play that was called Longevity, did that for 10 years. That was all about trying to digitize and automate the sales process. And sort of, learn the hard way how hard it is starting companies and doing that. And then after Longevity ended, I started with Adam, an Aussie guy, a brilliant Australian technology brain, who he and I started Open Solar. And it was to apply the same theory of what software can do for making sales efficient, but doing it as a platform so every contractor in the world could access the best toolkit to scale solar.
Okay, amazing. And yeah, if people aren't familiar with Open Solar, I'll put some links below. But it's an amazing tool, isn't it? That could be used all around the world.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of like you've tracked solar's growth, I guess, from zero, to where we are today, where it's a really big player. Where do you see it going from here? What's going to happen from here? It maybe in the UK context, but also more broadly. Where's solar going to go from here today?
Yeah, well, it's sort of this like the constant trend that people always underestimate, and they have for the whole 25-year history I've been doing this, is how the cost reductions drive further growth, and that further growth drives further cost reductions, and that kind of cycle has driven some just incredible growth and results for the industry. Like when I got in, I remember my textbook at UNSW had the headline was the incredible growth of solar from 40 megawatts to 80 megawatts in the late 90s. And, we as an industry did 600,000 megawatts last year, 600 gigawatts. And there's 2,000 gigawatts of capacity in manufacturing. So basically the kind of trends are we've been growing at about 30+% a year for over 2 decades. And that really doesn't stop. So I think the costs continue to fall. We're at 10 cents a watt factory gate. As long as the politicians don't mess it up, frankly, and we have an open, free market so consumers can make free choices, then I think it will continue at 25%. And the model that I built and finalized and released actually quite recently, I've called the S curve, because what that shows is that at 25% growth, we actually get to 50% of the world's energy delivered by solar in under 10 years. So this point of the growth curve is really interesting. It's where it really kind of kicks in and gets really, really big.
And so when you're talking about energy, I guess, one of my gripes of being an engineer in this world with politicians is when they say, oh, we're going to have a clean energy system, they're really just talking about electricity. And I guess that 50% figure is much more than just electricity. It's potentially the energy that's powering heat pumps, EVs, all this kind of stuff. yeah, what are your thoughts on? Do we need to electrify more first to facilitate that, or is that just part of the process? And is that going to happen
Yeah,
automatically?
I'm glad you raised it. So this model and what I believe will happen is the whole world has to and will electrify. So it's 100% electrification. So there's 160,000 terawatt hours of primary energy
Okay,
that we
yeah,
need across all energy. Electricity's about 25,000, and then there's the rest. What I assume in the model is that we go 100% electric, and that 50% of that will come from solar by 2035. And then you get the kind of slowing S curve. You get to about 80% from solar by 2045, and the rest from like nuclear, hydro, and a lot of wind.
yeah,
And the interesting maths is, which you probably know as an engineer, but most people don't, including some really smart, brainy CEO, government level kind of people, is that you actually need 60% less primary energy if you electrify. So what we actually need is about 60,000 terawatt hours of electrical energy to have the exact same end state experience in our economy and our lives, because our cars are just way more efficient if they're
yeah,
electric. We don't have the power plant conversions from burning chemical energy and turn it into useful forms. So yeah, so it's way more efficient, and it will be powered by sunshine.
I don't know if you saw the Committee on Climate Change's seventh carbon budget, but within that they had this incredible Sankey diagram of the energy system in the UK today, where 80% of energy comes from fossil fuels, and in 2050, where they're talking about maybe 20% of the energy coming from fossil fuels, but the amount of waste that's dissipated in moving to an electrified world with heat pumps, with electric vehicles, with high efficiency motors, etc. Is really special. So I guess, yeah, my focus is on, well, my expertise and my knowledge is on the UK, and you're talking about a much bigger story here. What's your thoughts about solar in the UK? So both the conversations around the land grab of solar farms, or the grey sky we have above us, like what's the future for solar going to be in this country? And do you see it having the same impact as you do more broadly?
Yes, I think the starting point in Britain is it's got the hardest economy to solar electrify, like of the big economies in the world, because of basically the biggest challenge is obviously northern heating in the winter. You got the lowest amount of solar production, just with the highest amount of heating demand. And so I think you still have a very solarized economy, but not as much as what will probably be like 70, 80, 90% in many countries, because it's so cheap. Like it's
Sure.
fundamentally the lowest cost energy now. Um, so the kind of mix we could imagine is you have a mix of domestic solar representing a pretty decent share, maybe like 30, 40%, and wind being another 30, 40%, which complement each other quite nicely through the year. We get peak wind energy in the winter, and just a ton of batteries. So like the EV connected to the grid, you're going to have like thousands of gigawatt hours of battery storage from stationary and EV. You've got effectively massive amounts of storage in hydro from mostly the north of the country, and interconnectors. And I think you'll see more interconnectors to Scandinavia. So in effect, they will be winter supply complementing the downturn in solar. And then the one that people aren't really talking about is from the south is high voltage DC long distance solar. So I don't know if you come across S links, and
Yeah,
there's the rock and big if you can generate 3.6 gigawatts of power, ship it into the national grid at under
12 hours a
10
day.
12 hours a day with higher uptime than a nuclear power plant, like over 90% capacity factor, at under 10 cents, under 10 pence per kilowatt hour. Like, we should have 3 or 4 of those for some geopolitical diversity. They should probably be in Southern Europe and North Africa and spread around. But interconnectors were already a massive amount, like 10% of our supply. So like just diversity, more interconnectors, and super low cost Southern European, North African sunshine is the lowest cost option.
Yeah, and that's so exciting, isn't it? I think, yeah, you get really bad faith arguments of people saying wind doesn't always blow or sun doesn't always shine. You kind of like as if they're ever going to be the only source of electricity. And
Yeah,
that interconnector story is so exciting. Of well, the wind blows somewhere in Europe, hey, and the sun
yeah,
shines somewhere in Europe all the time. And
yeah,
yeah, just seeing already what we've got with those links to to Northern Europe and to Scandinavia and what could be is so exciting.
It is, yeah. The combination of that and batteries, like the distribution of those intermittent sources with just an awful lot of batteries. Like this is what, also from your friend in Durham, Andrew Crossland, like modeling out that with digital twins, what those grids look like is, it's just maths. It's not rocket science. It's very clever, but it shows you that it can be done.
And we've already got 1.5 million EVs in the UK, and that's already
Yeah.
a significant
Yeah.
capacity there. And I guess the thing that unlocks is the vehicle to grid charging, which
Yeah.
isn't commercially available yet, I guess. But when it is,
Coming.
then there's cars that are plugged in 95% of the time that can just do some small amount of feathering of services across the energy system is amazing.
Yeah. 100%, and that will also reduce the cost. There's a lot of talk. One of my gripes with the UK right now, even though we've got a much more progressive government, which is great, shooting for zero carbon in the electricity grid, as you say, by 2030, it's very top down. It's wind and big projects, big distribution. What we also need to complement that with is consumer led solutions. So if we are allowed to participate in the grid and we're compensated for the value we create. So if you're that car in your drive, as you just said, if I'm paid to let that battery discharge to avoid peak shaving, do some voltage control services, consumers don't need to understand it, but if they get paid £100 check at the end of the month, they're sure as hell more likely to go and get the EV.
Yeah. And I feel like that when we get there eventually, everything's kind of unlocked perfectly, hasn't it? And electrification's key. And I think one of the things I tend to say is that we can't solar panel our way out of this challenge in the UK anyway, because we need to deal with the car and we need to deal with the heating system. But when we've got there, it all just works so nicely that we can take electrons from wherever they are, we can store them whenever we want and use them for whatever we want. And that's really exciting.
Yeah, there's kind of a rule of thumb for maths we've done that you basically, as a homeowner, you can get about half of the energy you need for a fully electrified life. Heat pump, EV, electric appliances everywhere, so fully electric. You get about half of that energy from your roof on average. Some people more, some less.
Right.
The other half will come from the grid, and the grid will be wind and solar powered with connectors and distribution of those generation sources. And that's the future, and it's lower cost. That's the key thing. You'll spend less on energy than you do today.
And that's the story that's not told. I think there's a lot of bad faith arguments in this conversation that's trying to slow things down, and it's often fossil fuel backed, trying to prevent change. One of the bad faith arguments, or maybe good faith arguments, because I'm thrilled that people are starting to care about human rights. I wish they cared about human rights in the fossil fuel industry as well. But one of them about solar is people saying, oh, but look at the supply chain and what's happening in China where 80-90% of panels are made. What are your thoughts on that? And what's the conversation in the industry about the solar supply chain and potential problems that there are? And how can we improve that and make that better? What are your thoughts?
Firstly, for solar and storage and EV, there's absolutely a supply chain challenge. I would encourage everyone to look at the RMI content. Rocky Mountain Institute, now rebranded RMI. They've written great reports on the actual material, the tonnage, the material tonnage that is needed. And it's a tiny, tiny fraction of 1 year worth of fossil fuel movement of materials around the world. So we're blowing this completely out of proportion. So you're looking at a much, much, much smaller, like minuscule amount of materials that are needed for the complete electrification of the whole economy. And it's a one-off compared to extracting, I think it's 25, 30 gigatons of materials every year and then burning them, straight into it with an open system into the sky. So like it's closed loop. So you can close loop it. B, it's small. And then what you're left with, yes, it should have ethical standards applied to it. And so China's a very big question mark on all levels of the, do you trade with them? How do you trade with them? They supply the majority of so many sectors beyond clean tech. It's funny that we only focus on clean tech because the fossil fuel lobby is guiding media into this. But it's concentrated in China, supply like 80 to 90%, depending on which part of the technology stack. So my personal opinion is we need to engage with China. We need to give them more access to our markets in return for proof that there are ethical standards across the board. We should do that in all countries. Like there are ethical issues in the United States in production. Based on color of skin, the stats are pretty awful, just as they are for Muslim Uyghurs in China. So like it's not just a China thing, it's much more complicated. And yes, we need to make sure that the global purchasing power of the renewable energy consumer that is the future is applying pressure to make sure that that supply chain is ethical. But it's way more easily done than it is in fossil fuels.
Yeah, I'd love people to be having the same lens on some of our closest allies in the Middle East, or in the Gulf, that some really dodgy human rights things happening in Saudi, but we're happy to buy their oil.
Completely.
Yeah, it's a global system that's complicated and tricky, and the world is not perfect. And making the world a bit better by solar, by electrification is a good step. But challenge.
And it is a challenge. And Tom, if I may, just another couple of things on the supply chain. Like people also say that China's a potential enemy, and we can't have them supplying all this product. And and then we also need the manufacturing jobs domestically. Some facts I like to just challenge that generally when I'm speaking to people is the 90% of the jobs in our industry are not manufacturing. Like these are robots that make these products. Like if you go to a Chinese factory, I did a bit of time in a factory in Wuxi in China. It's just robots building, turning sand into glass and silicon PV and batteries, etc. Most of the jobs are in installation, sales and marketing, logistics, finance, and customer facing pieces. They're all local jobs. And because it's a distributed technology, they're hyper local jobs. So they spread out across the economy. So it's not a reason we can have a successful economy. Most of the economic value comes locally. We don't have to own manufacturing. Yes, we should have some diversity for risk purposes, and we should absolutely have ethical supply. But most of the economic rent comes from the energy they produce and the value of sales and install.
Yeah, amazing. I guess a couple more questions, and then I'll let you crack on with your busy day. One of them being, what should we so this channel tends to trying to talk to individuals or homeowners or that kind of stuff about the steps they could take to live a low carbon lifestyle. What would you be saying an individual in the UK should be doing next to have an impact on their community or their emissions locally?
Yeah, so I just think it's super simple, and everyone overcomplicates it. It's really very simple. You electrify your life, so you get an EV. When you change, you don't have to do it today, frankly. Like next time you change your car, just make it an EV. As long as you don't have tariffs on them, they will be cheaper than fossil fuel cars. So that's saving you money. Number two, get a heat pump. The economics on that, as you've posted on your channel, are about neutral right now. Plus or minus, some people save a bit, some people, depends on the electricity price. If you combine it with solar over the year, I think you actually have lowest cost electricity supply, and that can help the economics. So EV, heat pump, electrify everything in your house. So get rid of the gas cooker, put a nice induction hob in, and then you just have this beautiful, like we live in this 600-year-old farmhouse, beautifully warm year round with a heat pump, EVs plugged in outside, fast cars, hot showers, life's good. And that's it. It's really very simple. And then, eat less meat.
Yeah, 100%. All of that. It's so good.
That's it. Healthier, richer, and, and your community and planet are better off.
I love that. Yeah, the 600-year-old place that's warm all year round. It's kind of like, heat pumps don't work in old homes. Hey, ours is 150 years old and it's warm all year round. But our next door neighbour kind of stood on my back fence for a little while, talking about our heat pump and just saying, how's it work? What is this? What's this? What's this? And then within 3 months, did exactly what you said. Got an EV, got solar panels, got big batteries, got a heat pump, and his whole world's changed within like a 6-month period, and it's wonderful to watch that process.
I can't believe I missed the solar. I think I missed solar, the most important one. So solar, EV, heat pump. I'm going to get fired from my own job now. Get the solar system.
We need open solar to spin off as open heat. That's the next last question. I guess, what are you hopeful for? What are you excited about in the next 12 months, 24 months about this stuff? What gets you really excited each week?
I love the mass market transition of this in the next few years. It's not a single new technology. It's the fact that there are enough heat pump manufacturers coming to the market that the cost is going to continue to fall. That EVs are now economic, that solar has been economic for quite a few years, so that the massive small businesses around the UK can now get into selling this, and that's where Open Solar kicks in. You get this incredible enterprise level tool completely for free, so you can start selling and delivering all this technology in your community, and that those consumers can now access money saving devices that you don't even have to care about the environment. It's just better energy, lower costs, and that's the period we're going into now in the world. So yeah, that's what I get excited about. The thing that there's policy mechanisms that could make this so much easier. That if we have protocols on the grid so that we can get paid for the value we create on the grid, that's super easy to access, then that would really help augment the already good economics. And we have to make sure we don't put, as a government, put tariffs on panels and batteries and EVs and heat pumps, which there's a lot of pressure from the fossil fuel industry to do. We've got to, basically enjoy a free open market so we can access this low cost stuff.
Just on that, I saw news this morning of 300, 400, 3,000% tariffs from the States on East Asian solar panels. Maybe that means the rest of the world gets flooded with really even cheaper panels for a period of time. But it just feels, why focus just on the clean tech? It's really embarrassing, disappointing, foolish.
Yeah. And with the media, you just used, I would caution against even the word flooding. Like, to me, when you have, actually, as I see, if you said, Birchy, our economy is about to have massive availability of super low cost EVs that you can charge for 400 miles in 5 minutes. They're going to cost less than a combustion engine car. There's going to be zero pollution. You're going to avoid 24,000 deaths a year, and from according to the King's College on pollution from cars that kill British people every year, and that's going to save everyone money. I'm like, is that a flood? Is that flooding the market? Is it dumping? No, it's like, it's really good news. So we've got
What's
to get
the
the
better word then? What word should we use? It's almost like
mass clean tech availability.
Yeah. It's like sowing something positive, isn't it? Rather than flooding, it's like sowing something, that can grow. But
yeah, it's like low cost technology for everyone. That we've had waves of it. The big flat screens used to be unaffordable. Like, widescreen TVs, cell phones, all these things are it's just like solar panels and batteries and heat pumps are going the same way. It's just going to become mass market. You didn't worry that your TV was made in South Korea or China, but all the content was the BBC made was, local content, created jobs and excitement and cultural value. Same for solar, right? It doesn't matter that the cells come from China as long as they're ethically produced. That we have access to low cost energy and an economy that can thrive on the back of that energy and the things that we're good at.
Well, amazing. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to 2035 to see the 50% of energy. That will be a better world. So it's great to kind of cast that vision. So thank you so much for coming and chatting this afternoon. And we'll see you soon.
Great. Thanks for all the work you're doing to advocate for it all, Tom. Appreciate it.
I really enjoyed meeting Birchy and chatting to him for that 20-25 minutes. So thanks to Birchy for making the time and to Thom for the introduction. And I hope that you enjoyed this conversation on solar and the energy transition. One of the challenges I think we have in the conversation around decarbonisation is the assumption that electricity is the main challenge. So I was really pleased to hear Birchy talking through the wider energy system, the importance of electrification, of electric vehicles, of heat pumps, all supported by solar, particularly globally, and possibly wind in the UK, or definitely wind in the UK. We can't forget where we are burning fossil fuels as we transition to a cleaner, cheaper economy. Birchy, I think, made some really helpful points about material use for the energy transition. And you know what, if Birchy's vision for 50% of energy globally to be met by solar in 2035 comes true, we will definitely be living in a very different, and I'd say much better world. And I hope it does come true. What do you think?